One of the most ironic things that I often see, and it blows my mind every single time, is that we profess in business schools all these sort of self-helpy guru things, like taking breaks. Right. It's great. That's what they find. The evidence says is it's great. It's great for all sorts of stuff. Um, working within a certain amount of time, it's great. Um, Trying to build relationships that are both strong and weak. It's great. Um, Looking at long-term perspective. It's great. All of these things that I think this is the true irony, and it's so funny that I think it's just hilarious. Is that all of that stuff? The researchers that study that stuff actually don't abide by it. They really don't. They do all of the things that are completely opposite, and they do a lot of um, all of these things that are what you would consider not necessarily healthy behaviors. And many of us will question them and say, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense at all, right? Like they'll work on the weekends, they'll work late at night, they will, do competitions between how much that you actually write on your CV in terms of the papers that you write. They will do all of this impression management stuff. They will do all of these things that we know is just not healthy behavior. Or, they'll compete. All of these things we know is not healthy behavior. And if you were to read almost all of this literature, you would be like, oh my gosh, what are we doing here? Right. And then you actually see the incongruence between what people actually write about and what they say. And then what they actually do is so striking. And that's the thing that I think is really, really ironic and really funny is that the people that study that stuff, um, they're the ones that are the most detached from it. And they study these sort of samples that are sanitary, and then they look at how pretty this relationship is, and then they actually don't abide by it. Um, so there's two things that are going on there, right? There's many things that are going on there, but two that are really striking. The first one is they don't believe those results that they're actually writing about, which I think is actually the key thing because they think it doesn't apply to them. And that's the second thing. It doesn't apply to them. It's everybody else that's the problem. Um, and that's the great irony with all of this is we fall by the same human behavior trends. So do I think the evidence suggests, do I think all of that stuff is actually true? I actually do believe in a lot of it. I do think it is legitimate. And the findings are that, productivity does increase when you take breaks. That if you have a little bit of time to yourself, that is healthy. A little bit too much time to yourself is really horrible, right? Like it's not healthy. Um, Looking at having extra support in various different ways is healthy. um, asking individuals to do it all, that's unhealthy. Like all of that stuff that we know that on face value is pretty obvious stuff. Um, that we are constrained with how much we actually can do. That having some support is important. Building relationships, right? We know the evidence is very strong at this moment that social media and building relationships is really important. But I beg you to find legitimate research folks that, besides probably myself, and yet most people would discount me and say that I'm not legitimate. Um, you know, if you were to look at this and look at people that are legitimately doing the work, they will never do this stuff. They would say it's below them. They say it doesn't work, like all of that kind of stuff. That is stupid. And I'm like, oh my gosh, the irony is just funny. And I want you to sort of think about that is we, all of us fall prey to the same traps. All of us are very human, very human. And what I want you to do is not to look at, and this was like a mind blowing thing where I was like, for many years, it was like, okay, nobody's practicing what they actually preach. And I want you to think about that as a human being. What can you personally do about it? That's where you just set your own boundaries and don't listen to all of that stuff often. And you do the things that feel at the moment actually relatively good for you, right? Like I know that. So there was in recent years, I'm not going to name them because it's just, people get all their arms up, but there was collective action problems, right? Like where people had to band together to tackle a really big problem across the world. Um, and it was hard for many people. It was hard for me. It was very hard for me, but we were able to do it and we bonded together as a family. But there was a lot of people that could not do it. And that's where I actually kind of agree at you do the best that you can possibly do. And sometimes that best that you can possibly do is far below what everybody else can possibly do. Um, it's far below, but it's the best that you can do at this moment, right? It's kind of things like saving money or weight loss, doing physical fitness. We know that there is optimal levels for all of this stuff. And we know like saving money's easy because nobody really does it. But if you save 10 to 50% of everything that you make, you'll do pretty good by the time that you're retired. You invest that properly in index funds and mutual funds, you'll do pretty well. Uh, Nobody does it, right? And it's hard. Even researchers or people that study this stuff that are in finance and accounting and all this kind of stuff, maybe they're a little bit better. But in general, there's lots of people that don't do this kind of stuff. And they would argue and saying that there's all these twists and turns and they'll look at how they can game the system and all this kind of stuff. And we know like the evidence is really strong now against that you can sort of do this stuff and get away with it for any long period of time, right? Somebody actually had this great conversation recently with somebody who's really smart. They're like, if you are making 40% returns for more than several years, you would probably catch the eye of regulators and they would question what they're doing, probably throw you in jail. Um, and I was like, oh yeah, you know what? I never thought about that, but that's probably actually true. That does happen, right? If you repeatedly have above, extremely above average returns, it sort of catches the eye of people. So, what am I saying here is you can't, don't get distracted in what feels good for you and what you can possibly do. And you have your own limits on what you can possibly do. You do the best that you can possibly do that makes you feel good. The research folks don't know any better than you. In general, if you were to look at most, in fact, research studies, you're looking at explaining 5 to 10%. If that's a really good effect size, 5 to 10% of what's actually going on. It's sort of explanatory value. So don't get all up in the airs when you're not doing what you're supposed to do. But at the same time, look at what makes you feel good inside, right? And do those things. Do them to the best of your ability and just give everybody else the middle finger if they look down on you. Um, you try your best, right? And if you're one of those research folks that has to work all of the time, I could not do that. I would be very unhealthy. I would probably have a heart attack and die. But good on you if you're ready to do that. Good on you. Go tackle the world. I know you're not listening to this anyways because you're too busy working. All right. Take care and have a wonderful day.